Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. With it being 6 o'clock on Thursday, March 18, 2021, I will call this meeting of the Bartlett High School School Building Committee to order. Just a friendly reminder that on March 12, 2020, Governor Baker signed an executive order relieving government boards and committees from compliance with certain open meeting law requirements during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under the order, public bodies may hold meetings without providing physical public access, so long as the public has access to deliberations through alternative means. In this case, alternative means for this meeting is that we are using the Zoom platform, and I believe that the Zoom meeting information was posted on the school district website. Also, public bodies may allow for remote participation in meetings by all members, including the chair, with no members being physically present at a meeting location, as long as we have a quorum who are present with their video technology on, which we do at this time. Also a reminder that this meeting is being recorded, both video and audio, and may be posted to the school district website and or the school district YouTube page. First item on the agenda is the approval of the February 18th meeting minutes. If there are no recommended changes or questions, I will entertain a motion to pass those, to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mrs. Blythe, a second by Mr. Young. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Nieves?
Yes.
Mr. Avlis?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Blythe?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is OPM report. Good evening, Mr. Guyette and his team.
Good evening, everybody. I'll be pretty brief. Kent has a lot to go over tonight, so I want to be mindful of the time. And most of you have seen the information that I'm going to share. Again, this is the latest MSBA OPM report that I just put up on the screen. This is for February of 2021. Right now, this report contains mostly update information on the OPM. The MSBA is currently working on inputting all the information for Kent's team and his contract. But the biggest thing is to go over the project budget versus actual spent to date. This is what we try to touch on monthly with you all. And again, this will get into more and more depth as we go through and continue on in the process. Total encumbered to date has been just our contract at $234,500 with total invoices received to date of $34,880. And as I stated earlier, this will start getting populated now with the architect's contract value, as well as their invoices that are starting to come in now. So you'll start seeing this expand more and more. This shows in greater detail the invoices to date, encumbered to date, and invoices this period, which is the 6356 for the OPM. As far as the schedule is concerned, the schedule hasn't changed since our previous meeting. One thing that we do want to talk about, and I'm going to ask Kent to chime in as well. We are potentially looking at seeing if there could be a possibility for an additional SBC meeting on or about the 1st of April because of everything that's kind of coming together and trying to get the PDP ready for submission on April 16th. We felt that it would be appropriate to try to get in before the committee to do a review and have a vote for approval to proceed with the submission. So Ken, I don't know if there's any other details you wanted to add to that at this point, but that's.
Yeah, I would just add, on April 15th, as Ken said, we want to kind of vote to submit the binder. And again, the PDP is just, one path along the way. It's kind of a moving, process. But it would be helpful to get in front of everybody around April 1st to give some highlights to the educational plan that the district's been working very hard on. And then also show you some of the test fits that are going to come out of the square footage and the district's plan test fits kind of within the existing building and on and around the site. So that would be helpful just to have kind of a touch base. Maybe it could be a brief meeting. And then when we come to April 15th, we could go into everything in more detail, and then the school building committee could vote to approve submitting the PDP, which would go in the next day.
So that concludes my portion of the presentation, unless anybody has any questions specific for me.
Can I have a quick question? It's just maybe a technicality. Why would you not include the contracts that have been signed, i.e. the architect's contract, in your budget summary as encumbered?
So we don't, typically what happens is our finance, because this is all through the MSBA ProPay system, we have to wait until the MSBA has actually posted it to their system, which they have not done yet. And then it'll show up in the MSBA report as well as our ProPay system spreadsheets. So that's why it hasn't shown up as encumbered yet.
So I noticed on the warrant, which we'll get to at the end of the meeting, that there's still no invoices from the architect. Is that because the MSBA doesn't have it in their system yet? Or is that just coincidence that they haven't submitted any invoices and MSBA doesn't have it in their system?
So they, Fansburgh did just submit invoices last Friday that we have received and pushed along to the town. So you'll start seeing those go in, but it is coincidental to the fact that the MSBA does not have that posted in ProPay yet.
Okay. Any other questions for Ken or his team? And just for the record, Mrs. Contos did join us, I believe, around 6:04. So welcome, Mrs. Contos. Next item on the agenda is the designer report. Turn it back over to Kent and his team.
Great, thanks. Just let me know, did you see that advance?
No.
No, okay, one moment. I gotta stop sharing and.
See it now.
Did you see it advance?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, I'm just gonna go through the base of the schedule where we are. So there's been a lot of activity from mid-January to last week. So these are mapping out the same schedule that you've seen before with completed noted at it. So a bulk of the ones highlighted in green are with the educational leadership team. And the focus was developing the space program and also having conversations of the educational plan that the district is drafting and has to submit. And so those are the two, I would say, largest items that the MSBA is looking for when we submit on April 16th. The district's educational plan and what type of spaces you're going to have into this building in the size of the building. And that's what most of these meetings have built to. And going to the next page, we also had 4 workshops with David Stephen from New Vista, and we're going to be forwarding all the consolidated notes from his workshops. And so we're going to be due another draft of the educational plan. We looked at a brief one previously and commented, and I know the group went back and they're working hard, and we're going to see another draft. Myself, David Stephen, and Kathleen Tringali, who is from Nauset Regional High School, has been through a large-scale renovation project like this. We're all going to comment on that draft, and that'll give enough time to get the final educational plan on April 13th. So that's where we are, I say, with the kind of heavy lift on the district side. And we've had some great meetings, and at the end of this, we're going to share the proposed program. So as you see, April 16th, we submit to the MSBA, and then there's a break with school vacation, and then we're back to the preferred schematic report phase of that. So again, we just track the same educational leadership team meetings. Here, we're gonna wanna weave in perhaps some facility working groups. So if we have Al and his group, we wanna have some more technical meetings as well, because we're taking a concept and we still have a concept, but we want to begin to make it you know, kind of customized to you, what you look for in mechanical systems and items like that, as well as there could be athletic facilities. We might want to meet with an athletic group as well. So in the PSR that starts after April 16th, we want to get into more detail with more specific user groups. Okay. And then this is just kind of a snapshot of what we're going to be submitting for the MSBA binder. You might start seeing these kind of division markers, 3.1.4. That aligns with the MSBA PDP report. So kind of all along, you've been seeing the components of what the MSBA is going to see. So we kind of structure these shows to align with what they, how they want to see it and the type of materials they want to see it. And you got to kind of consider when you submit on April 16th, for some at the MSBA who's reviewing this, this will be the introduction to Webster. So you really want to give them kind of a broad, you know, look, stepping back a little bit. So for you, you kind of live this every day. For them, they want to kind of get to know you and get all the information. So you're going to see a series of, you know, diagrams and information that are useful for the MSBA and just for the designers as we kind of move along in the process. But we thought these photos were interesting of the site pre-high school, and then the high school, as you see the ball field to the north of after the high school is complete, and then the current with the middle school. So these are always interesting to see how the site's kind of evolved, and you begin to see patterns with kind of the natural environment and how things have kind of, you know, pushed and pulled a little bit. And that leads us directly to this, where, you know, now we know where your wetlands are. We start looking at the setbacks and how, you know, over the years, the placement of the buildings and your roadways and where your athletics, how that has kind of worked with stormwater management and what the result is on kind of the natural ground plane. And this is important because as we start looking at different options, looking at athletic fields or looking at parking areas, these are going to shift and mold. And there might be some wetlands that we need to replicate. If we take a section of wetlands out and we can under 5,000 square feet under local jurisdiction, that might create some flexibility in the site. And so mapping this out with our civil engineers and our wetland scientists are very important because as we move the pieces around, stormwater moves around. And that's why we map this out. Our surveys are complete. We had picked up some easements on those. And so we've had some conversation with the town, and some of the easements we don't necessarily need to worry about. There is an overhead utility easement that severs like the existing field from the baseball fields. But other than those popping up, we're kind of free and clear with the site, which is a good thing. Again, all information that the MSBA wants to see mapped out, that you do hold the deeds, and it's everything within the boundary lines that we're showing options. There's not going to be any issues. What I'm going to do now, Vince is just going to give us a little snapshot. Again, we're just talking very early on in a concept, but it also gets a little technical because we need to build a budget. And so Vince is going to walk us through some of the exterior detail analysis, looking at different thermal values.
Okay, thanks, Kent. So on the left-hand side, that's your existing condition. We've taken that from the drawings that we have. So we haven't really done any exploratory work. So we did a little bit of small cut into the brick. We haven't done anything on the roof yet. So everything we're relying on right now is from the drawings. So you can see you've got a CMU block wall 8 inches thick. In some cases, it's 6 inches thick. And then you've got about 1.5 inches of insulation and airspace, and then you've got your brick. And all of that fits on a foundation of about, it looks like down there, it's 14 inches. So that's where we're starting from right now. So that's your basic wall. We have a little bit of insulation. We've got brick, and as you follow it up to the top, you can see that the steel beam, and there's a little bit of a 2-inch insulation on that, but it's not really continuous as much as, you know, overlapping. And then on the roof itself, there's about, we don't know for sure, but we're guessing around 2.5 to 3 inches of insulation up on the roof. That's got a tar and gravel roof on top of it. So that's our basis where we're starting from. And if we look at that, we're looking at on the roof side, we have tar and gravel, we have the insulation, and then we have the decking that gives us a little bit of R value. So we're getting an R value of roughly 10.82. And then on the wall, there are a number of components. We're using air film, we're using the brick, some air cavity, insulation, even the paint, we're trying to build it up as much as we can, and we're getting an R value of 12.82. So that's our existing, where we're starting right now. And as any renovation, we're going to look at to try to meet the current energy code, which is much more stringent. So on the right-hand side, we're taking what we've got, the brick wall and the components, and we're saying that in order to increase it, in order to meet the minimum requirement for the insulation, which is right now, if you look on the left-hand side, we have a minimum R value of 9.3 or 9.13 for the insulation. The code requires 11.1 continuous insulation. So we don't have it, we don't meet the existing code right now. So on the right-hand side, we're looking, well, how can we do that? Without removing the brick, we're going to propose to, one option would be to propose to add 3 inches of insulation to the interior. And then to cover that over, we have another bay of stud with insulation on top of that. So the additional insulation meets the energy code, helps us to, to make the building more energy efficient. And then also, when we get to when we get to the stud part, that allows us to put in our electrical outlets and things like that we want to run along if we have to run anything new, bring it on. So as you look on there, so when we add all the new insulation and the new insulation to the interior as well as the exterior, we're getting a total R value now of 25.05. So the good thing is that, the more insulation, the better the wall works, and the smaller the mechanical units can be when we replace the mechanical units. And then the same thing with the roof. As you can see, we added the insulation again on the inside, and then on the roof, we're looking to add 5.5 or 5.25 inches of new poly iso insulation. So that insulation, that would get the minimum code requirement right now, which is an R30. So if you look at that, you have a new roof, either PVC or rubber, new insulation, and the deck. And so now we're just meeting the minimum for the code at 30.82. So that's where we would look at first and saying, okay, we have one option, and that's just, to meet the code and to salvage and retain the brick.
And just want to point out that the existing 2 inches of rigid, is 40 years old. And so we have put in a factor of deterioration on it, so it loses its efficiency. So our envelope engineer has calculated that into that value of that 40-year-old 2-inch rigid insulation inside that cavity.
Right. Yes. Okay. So now we, progressing. Okay. What is it going to be if we were to do a little bit more and try to make something more, what we're used to doing now on the current code, and as well as a new construction. So what we've done is explored the possibility of taking the brick off completely. And so what would that do to the wall system, and how does that an advantage or a disadvantage to take off the brick? So on the left-hand side of the roof detail, we would look at, maybe even increasing the insulation on the roof. In this case, we could go to between 6 inches and 8 inches. So on the roof, most of the heat rises, right? So all the heat rises. So the biggest bang for the buck is trying to maintain the heat from going out the roof. So if you increase the insulation up on the roof, you get a little bit more. But at a certain point, putting more and more insulation on the roof really is not any more beneficial. So somewhere in that 6 to 8 inch range is really the sweet spot for adding insulation to the roof right now, is how we see it. And then as you go down, we're looking at adding 4 inches of insulation to the exterior wall. So if we take off the brick, we add 4 inches of insulation, and we don't need to add insulation to the interior anymore. We would still meet the code by just doing the 4 inches of insulation on the outside. But also I've got another blue line that's dashed. That's an air vapor barrier. That's an important requirement. On the previous slide for the existing building, there's a little bit of an air vapor barrier that was inherent with the use of asphaltic mastic that they use to set the insulation on the wall. But this one would be a little bit more spray-on type of air barrier to help seal all of anything that might have been holes. A lot of times, with brick, there's a lot of brick ties, and those ties interrupt the actual vapor barrier. So by spraying on, we would seal up any of the holes that might have been existing in the old barrier, and this would help to really get a tight seal on the exterior to help air leakage. Also, it helps to tie that air barrier into the window system. So as we replace the windows, we would want to tie that air barrier into the window itself and make a complete seal. So then as we extend a little bit further out, now we have an opportunity to provide a new wall type of system. So I've listed a few potential exterior finishes. We don't know what it is right now. We haven't really thought too much, but in the past we've used phenolic, which is kind of a hard board, slate or tile, metal panel, zinc, wood. It's a special kind of treated wood, and then terracotta or maybe even a thin brick. If the brick look of brick is still what we want to go with, we can still provide a thin brick. So if we look at that component system and we add up the R values there by adding the new insulation and going back with the air vapor barrier, we're looking at a wall of about 23.44. Okay, so the minimum right now, like I said, is an R11.1, and the recommended is around R22. So it would be just a little bit better than what the recommended would be, around 23.4. But that includes, the air vapor barrier and special air zones. On the roof, for the options for the roof, right, we would look at maybe again putting either PVC or TPO. Those are sort of more typical, or we could also look at the rubber EPDM membrane that you have a little bit on right now near the gym. And so if you add that together with the new 6 to 8 inches of insulation, we're now increasing our roof total to R46.2. And the minimum, again, it says is R30. So the previous one we had as an R30. Recommended is R45. So again, we're just a little bit more than the recommended at R46.2. So as far as advantages, by increasing the insulation, right, we would get a better thermal performance. And that means, again, the new air barrier also controls the air leakage, as I mentioned before. We would update the aesthetic. So if you change the brick, you could have a different look to the building. The better thermal control also helps to reduce the HVAC equipment. So as we size determining what the HVAC units are going to be, it's, the more insulation you have, the less that they can, the smaller those units can be. And then better drying of the air cavity. The new systems are sort of rain screen type systems. They get much better airflow through them. And so the cavity would dry a little bit better in terms of where we were with the brick before. The disadvantage, though, is unfortunately, it's obviously going to cost more because one, we have to take off the old brick. So the added cost of removing the old brick and disposing that is one of the issues. And also the addition of adding the insulation back in. So we have to buy all new insulation and we have to add a new air barrier. So those things are going to add cost to the project. And then the last thing would be the standard brick size. Unfortunately, once we take out and increase the insulation, the issue is going to be, as I mentioned, we have a 14-inch existing foundation. If we increase the insulation, that pushes the brick further out. And therefore, the brick is going to extend beyond the foundation edge. And we don't want that because it just creates an issue for bearing. So that would be a sort of a negative part to doing that. And pretty much that's where we are. But like I said, we're just at the beginning of it. We don't really have any other, specific things. It's just, these are just ways that we're exploring right now because we have to look at both extremes. What is it to just upgrade the building? And then what is it if we were to, really get to a point where we want to meet current standards? So.
Thanks, Vince. So we are kind of overlapping some technical information here because it's important because as Vince had kind of spoke to, we know we're replacing all the windows and all the doors and the roof, and it's all that interface. So when we're replacing those within the existing brick, we can do that. But all the seals make it a little bit more technical and cumbersome. Or we can look at creating a new kind of thermal layer and air vapor layer within the new cavity wall. Big picture, we need to carry a cost. So typically at the early stages, we would carry an allowance for X amount of dollars, new exterior envelope. And then we'd probably have our base options just retaining the brick. So that's why we want to show you this, because these are some of the conversations that we need to have when we submit some magnitude costs to the MSBA. And they want to know and just to your committee and your community that, we're doing our job and we need to investigate when we're looking at heavy renovation projects. Thanks, Vince.
No.
Okay, so now we're just going to kind of step back. Again, this is existing conditions and it's all important. And pretty much all the diagrams you're going to see, just kind of imagine the MSBA or even the community looking at these, and then how does proposed program alter through each of these, we'll call them kind of patterns from the outside, circulation patterns, vegetation, how kids use the campus. And so we just go through a series of diagrams that help that conversation. So here, what's important, the existing vegetation is important with lawn space. And this is what we have. And any new plans or driveways or play areas or athletic fields, how would this change the existing vegetation? So we're trying to call out where we have trees versus lawn and versus circulation. This is more of an observation. And I think the MSBA on an earlier call was kind of astute and picked this up too. They realized with the large high school in the middle of the site, it displaces a lot of items. The middle school is kind of back of house in the back of the site to the high school. You don't really see it. It has all the athletic fields off to the east, circulation with roadways just loop around. But the building does create, a really strong edge, which I think works an advantage to how it was originally designed. When you come in, it's a really long edge and then it kind of kicks back at C building. And what's interesting about that, it begins to, call attention to the fields to the east. But these are just simple diagrams. Again, it helps the, the MSBA when they review these documentations to kind of know how the site looks and feels. This observation, obviously the middle school parking lot meets the high school. It's a little bit of a pinch point, but again, it's an important observation. It's not much of a buffer between the two buildings. When we look at kind of social hubs, we're looking at social hub could be athletics off to the east, main entry plazas. We have an underutilized exterior area by the cafeteria. So with a new option, if you're studying different options, do these social hubs and gathering places alter? Are they enhanced by a new design or new circulation? Just connection to the athletic fields, how the kind of lay of the land works now and what it would look like with any of the designs we'll start investigating. Circulation patterns are very important, from primaries to secondaries to drop-offs. How does all this work now and how will it work in the future? Pedestrian circulation and flow and the density of that, where are a majority of the students and teachers walking this site, as well as community members who I kind of observed walking in the existing track. And you kind of overlay all this from pedestrian to vehicular, and you begin to see where there could be some conflicts or some interesting spots that you might want to take advantage of. We also look at the way the existing building is programmed, just as a kind of big picture. We have, the theater and the gymnasium kind of off to the north and the east, academic space, the cafeteria separated from that, obviously the district administration portion to the south. And through a lot of the programming conversations, a lot of it is revolved on adjacencies. And if you're looking at creating more of a community building, there's conversation of, well, the cafeteria should be grouped with the theater and the gymnasium. So you would clearly have a community building with the three main functions that the community would go to or accessed during the summer or after hours or on the weekends, separated from the academic world. So that's been a lot of conversation we had with the different groups and when it comes to program adjacencies. And circulation wise, I would kind of categorize this as a very long building. It has some nice breaks between the different sections, but overall it's a long hallway with the two main access points between A and B and C, and then the program that is kind of flanked on both sides. So this building is really more rooms off of a corridor. And then that can coincide with what you're experiencing with natural light. Now, the classrooms and offices do have natural light, but when we're talking about kind of big picture, what's the feel of the school when you come in, in the center of the, B and C, because they're so wide, there's really not a lot of natural light coming in. And so do some of these new plans improve upon that? And then when it comes to access points, we counted 16 access points into this, primaries and secondaries and egress. Is there a method to consolidate this? Can we enhance security by consolidating this, or is this the right number? So again, we want to look at how the existing building looks at kind of security, if there's any voids that we need to fill. And then when we look at those options, we'll be able to address that. And then with an existing building, just as Vince went through the thermal envelope that we've been working with our engineer, we work with our structural engineer to understand how this building is structured, the bones of it. What areas we cannot touch or modify at all, and what areas do we have a little bit more flexibility. And so mapping out kind of the lay of the land where we can move is very important. So that gives you kind of a summary of the existing conditions, and as we're developing this report for the PDP submission. Now I'm going to shift into educational visioning. As you looked at that schedule, it's been pretty heavy since mid-January to basically last week. And there have been a variety of different groups. We've met with the teachers. There's the educational leadership group that's a constant, that's working on the educational plan. And also we had a design working group where we had up to 20 members of the leadership team and teachers, which was great. There were 4 workshops, and the focus was to give direction to the building and to the educational plan. And then this is just a snapshot of guiding principles. So there were 6 that kind of rose to the top. David Stephen from New Vista shared other schools, guiding principles, and Webster kind of crafted their own. And we thought these 6, resonated. And what I want to point out is there's a lot of kind of high level thinking here, but what does it mean architecturally? So focus on learning. There's different methods of teaching and learning. And the takeaway architecturally is we want to support those spaces. So that could be in a variety of smaller support spaces. And how are they positioned within the building? Innovation pathways is very important. You have these career pathways that are infused with general academic. And what does that look like for this project? Well, it's a physical request of space to the MSBA. So there's a health care pathway lab that's created, and we're requesting that, as well as an advanced engineering lab as part of this pathway. And so that's how that directly relates to the program, its space. And then in the future, where does that space want to live to take most advantage of it? Personalization and ownership. This is really all the great things happening, and how do you celebrate that? It's around wayfinding and streetscapes. So how do we show what's happening in the maker space or the art studios or even the theater, and make that part of the everyday experience? Right now the school's a lot of rooms off the hallway, but how do we create more of an interactive experience for everybody as they're kind of going from one side of the building to the other? School as community resource. It's very important to have this building support the greater community, and what's their level of engagement. We know that some of those larger spaces are going to be used with the gym and the auditorium, the media center, the cafeteria, and this really speaks architecturally as part of this project. How do we provide access, and what's that level of engagement? Connections, again, building community partnerships coming in and presenting, outdoor learning and gathering. So these are all about connections, both with groups and physical space. And this comes down to adjacencies. So just smart adjacencies can transform this entire project, not necessarily asking for more space. And we'll go into that a little bit later. And then adaptability and evolution, as different kind of teaching pedagogies change and methods, as well as technology. We want to make sure that this building is equipped, it's able to adapt. So that focuses on making sure on the technology side that your infrastructure supports everything you need in the future, and that we create multi-purpose spaces that are not just task specific, but can handle different activities and different requests for the program. Another workshop focused on adjacencies. And again, we're not laying out floor plans, but we want to take the program and come up with what the ideal scenario should be. And then we take these diagrams and then we superimpose them into the building plan and see if it if it matches this or it doesn't match, and then we can like push and pull and move some walls around, and we see if we can come closer to matching these key adjacencies. So this one speaks to the heart of the school. That was really important to the group. So on the left-hand side, that's a community wing, and the community would come in as well as students, but you'd be able to separate this out. And so there's the heart of the school. You see the great things happening. There's a connection to the gym, the cafeteria, the auditorium. You have administration and counseling kind of as like a control point. And then everything on the right-hand side are those academic clusters. So you have maker spaces with the science department, other general academics. And then within that, you have language support spaces and Quest and life skills and special education. So this diagram really speaks to an academic side and a community side and what those adjacencies should be. And then we need to test those design options in your existing building to see if it lends itself to these adjacencies. Now we hone in to an academic neighborhood. And, you know, again, right now, as you're walking along, you have a variety of teaching spaces off of the hallway. But now how can we support that, going back to those guiding principles? So one way to do it within an academic neighborhood is just infuse it with a series of varied spaces and different program. So here's 4 or 5 general classrooms that's clustered with a teacher support space. So that could be a department based or maybe just open to all teachers. Right in the middle of the classroom cluster would be teacher support. Then there'd be a student support breakout space, as you see highlighted in the pink color. Make sure special education is within all these academic neighborhoods. And of course, you know, bathroom support so that no one's walking way down the hall. So these are all kind of self-contained clusters. And then that cluster could be positioned next to another cluster. So you're getting a synergy between 2 disciplines. And that's what's really important about diagramming. You just don't kind of take, you know, what you have and kind of deal with it. You're encouraged to really explore here. And that's what we're going to come back to you with some options to see how we can match these ideal adjacencies that the working group developed. Okay, now I'm going to shift into the proposed program, and I think from day one, this has been a focus at the school. I know everybody's been working very hard on establishing this, and we just want to kind of take a step back to show everybody kind of where we are. And so here is the existing building that you see mapped out. And I aligned these columns to the MSBA space template. And so core academic is a category that they evaluate by itself. And that's science rooms and teacher support and general classrooms, special education, music, art, voc, health, PE, media, auditorium. So they're all their own categories. And that's how the MSBA has it organized. And that's how we have to stay within these categories. And so what we did, we've inventoried your existing spaces and we've calculated all these. And then the gross square footage of your building, including those penthouses, is roughly 189,000 square feet. And so if we shift into the proposed category, you kind of see some of them actually go up and some of them go down. And then working with the proposed
Excuse me.
template. Yep.
Hey, can I ask a question? It's Lisa. Do you have an overlay on that with those 2 together?
I can do that. Probably not. Well, let me see actually if we did have that slide. No, we do. What I can do is take the next slide and I can
Okay.
combine a hybrid and kind of send it maybe as a separate exhibit to the group.
Yeah, I was
With-
just curious. I wanted to see what it, switching from slide to slide is one view, but I wanted to see what the overlay looked like.
No, that's a good point. So we'll build that and we could actually overlay the existing MSBA and the proposed. So yeah, so these are just kind of a visual, and I think that'll be a good graphic that we can do. So we'll provide that to you. And so we got to the proposed, and right now the overview after the program has been vetted out, we're at around 158,000 square feet, and that brings us to this document that may be a little bit easier to see. So there's the categories on the left, and your existing square footage has been inventoried on the second column. And so the net is very important. So the net is your usable space. That's everything within the wall. And we've determined there's 128,500 square feet of net space So that excludes, toilets and wall thicknesses and hallways and some limited custodial areas. And then the grossing factor is all that other pieces to make the building, the exterior walls, the hallways, the big entry lobbies you have in between A and B and B and C. And so you can see that there's a jump when you talk gross square footage. So as we go through the core academic, the proposed net is 105,335. And this is what the group has been working on very hard over the past month and a half, of real space that they can justify to the community and to the MSBA. And if we look at the MSBA square footage based on the student population, they come up with 74,380. So, much lower than what you have. But they don't expect you to stay at 74,380. That is a default template that goes to every district if they're doing a high school. But they do have formulas that do play into your student population. So they're going to base everything when they look at what is being requested to that 74,380. And we know, and we'll go into detail, there's central office. It's not going anywhere. You just renovated it. That's 7,200 square feet right there. So that's kind of, something that's already, baked into the equation. We'll go into further detail.
Kent, it's Lisa. Can I ask another
Yes.
question?
Yes.
So does this mean we have, over 50,000 square feet that's over and above what MSBA wants here?
No,
So
no, more than that. Well, yeah, more than the
74
30,000, more than the, than what the MSBA.
Yeah,
So let's put it this way. When you use their template, their default template, I think there's a couple glitches with it. I would say you really have to focus on the net. So yeah, when you look at that net at 74,000, yeah, that's pretty much what they're looking at. So that would be about 50,000. You're right.
so we have about a surplus of 50,000. However, in terms
Without
of what we're saying for proposed is less. So I guess I'll wait for you to finish going through the discussion.
yeah,
Trying
and
to figure what this means.
yeah, you'll see. Now a lot of it's going to live in the other category on net
Okay.
square footage, which again, you have central office already in the equation. So I'll just kind of run down just some quick ones, and I'll probably do it in the next couple slides, and we can come back to this overall. But yes, always focus on the net, not so much the gross, because even on the MSBA default, I would say that their grossing factor is really light. So their base default should be around 112,000. But that really, they're just going to focus on the net. And then at the end of the day, the goal is some of this is strictly going to be on the district. That's not even a question. But the educational leadership team has been doing a great job being diligent and establishing, real arguments for additional reimbursement. And most of the reimbursement is going to come that could be considered based on other projects under core academic category and the special education category. So if you're looking at adding additional space in art down, most likely they're not going to, they'll allow you to build it, but they will not give you additional reimbursement for it. But we won't know that until actually into the schematic design phase. So what needs to happen is there has to be a square footage in a program that is sound, that's been vetted out, and the MSBA sees that when they read the educational plan, that they take you seriously. And that's really the name of the game here, is when you submit this, you're serious about what you've built into that proposed square footage for the space program. And just the conversations I've had with everybody in that leadership team, they know that, and they've been working very hard. And I think there's a really I would say, sound program that's being proposed here. So the next few slides focus strictly on the variance from the default to the proposed, because that's what they're going to be interested in. And I want everybody to know the way they vet this out is this kind of technical stuff, just extracting out, how many you're asking and what the square footage is. How they consider it for reimbursement is how it is woven into the educational plan. That's where they want to see, a real connection into the vision of this school. And that's really important. And that's why that plan is extremely important. So core academic, you have 17 current classrooms. They give you 15. You're asking for 16. So you're asking for one extra classroom. There's a wellness program that you have had at the school for years. That doesn't show up on the MSBA default template, but there is staff for it. So that should be a serious consideration. And the MSBA, I think, would take that serious because it's a program that you already have for years, and you have staff for it. And it doesn't show up on the template, so that's a reasonable request. English language learner spaces as part of core academic support. There's not a line for that, but that's very important. We're seeing requests for those type of spaces more and more. In my past experience, they've say if you ask for 4, they'll give you 2. So it's very important because that's student support space. And typically you'll see these kind of support classrooms within those academic neighborhoods. So there's 2 spaces at 500 square feet being requested. An additional student seminar. Again, these are those breakout rooms. And so we're kind of looking at, 4 or 5 departments in neighborhoods. And so we want to make sure that we have one of these student seminar spaces in each. And so it's a pretty light lift there for 250 additional square feet. That's one space that could be part of that neighborhood cluster. So there are 4 general science labs that are supported in the MSBA template, and the Bartlett requires 4 general science labs. So that's good, that aligns. But the innovation pathway is not on the template, and that's really important to you. And so we're requesting a healthcare. Some of my spaces, oh yeah, it's all in one line. So we're requesting a innovation pathway lab with a prep for healthcare, and a same lab with a prep for advanced engineering. And those are bigger spaces. They're around the same size as those science labs because you need that for OSHA standards and the type of activity that they're going to be doing in those spaces. So they're very specific. And they're so specific, they can't be just open like the MSBA science labs, which we did meet with the science department and kind of showed them what those labs look like. They want to keep them flexible. So it's all perimeter fixed utilities. So these labs are different than general science labs. They're really task specific and station specific. So from my experience, everything asked in the core academic is completely reasonable. On special education, the value on their default was pretty low. It was in the 4,000 range, and what's being requested overall is around slightly over 8,000. So in here, we're asking for double of what the state has on their default. But there's a need, and this has been a lot of hours going over what special education spaces you currently have. And currently, I think we're tracking over 9,000. We got the request down to 8,400. So I've just kind of noted various support spaces because those are very unique to your district, and so there's a lot of spaces. And we'll also share the overall template as well. So that's a big ask, and we're hoping that they'll meet you near the number that you're requesting. I'm sure when we submit this, they're going to have lots of questions on special education and why you need all the additional spaces, but you have a lot of different programs that would require it, such as Quest and kind of the 18 to 22 program, and then just general support for the other students, office space and specialist space. So then now we get into art and music. I'm just going to say they're not going to necessarily entertain space. They historically do not, but maybe we'll get lucky here. And so they only give you one art room. So we're requesting one art room at 1,200 square feet. So what's being requested is an additional art room. And everyone's being resourceful here. And you're not saying, hey, give me another 1,200 square foot art room. We're saying, you know, we can live with 800. We can do what we need in an additional art room at 800. So that's part of the MSBA taking you serious. So you didn't just go in and just keep asking for more square footage. You actually vetted this out and you said, hey, I don't need 12. I can do it with 8. Just can you support us with that? So I thought that was a good one. We looked at adding a practice room. That's for music. And some of this were trade-offs. So there was a large ensemble space associated with music. So that was reduced by 50 square feet. And then there's a large music storage that was reduced by 150 square feet. So there's a little trading off here that was vetted out for that practice room and that additional art room. So the total you're asking is 675 in that category. Vocations technology beyond the template, the takeaway is 780 beyond the default. They give you good space for vocations and technology. And so I think this one was pretty good. There was an ad for a technology office because there's a lot of activity that's happening in that suite, and a lot of staff, and also a media technology lab, which would be an area where you could do green screen and film at 800. Again, I've seen some of these high school projects where they're asking for TV studios. I think everybody here is being resourceful. I think that shows up. Then we get into PE. So your gym is bigger than the default by 1,900 square feet. So that's going to be on you. Everything on here in the gym is going to be on the district. So that's there were gender neutral locker room changing spaces added, which is a good thing to do, and a trainer's room. So you currently have a trainer's room. And that was important. So we put that back into the template. So you have 2,400 square feet within the gym category. And I would just say they're going to let you do it, but they're going to not reimburse on that. But we feel it's important, to obviously with an existing gym, it's probably best to leave it as a nice open space. And even testing out, other options, if a gym's going to be new, it still should be based on this number. Auditorium's another hit. They give you I would say a ultra small auditorium. It's based on 2/3 the population. It's I think slightly around 3,000 square feet, and it's going to be very difficult to invite the community and even have the whole student body in a show. And if we retain the existing shell of the auditorium, just using the existing auditorium as as kind of what we're looking at for space, we can get 500 seats. Right now there's 600, but when we upgrade it to ADA, you're looking at within that existing auditorium around 500 seats. That's a pretty robust auditorium, and it fits the entire student body. You're asking for an additional 2,338 square feet. And that's just to populate what you have right now, just to fill the rest of the existing auditorium box beyond the template. The stage, they give you 1,600 square feet. I've designed a lot of theaters. I would recommend asking for 200 additional square feet on here, and they probably won't support it, but as designing a proper theater, backstage house, 1,800 square feet is really what you need. So that would be kind of a recommendation from me to increase that stage house. Media center, no change. Dining, this they should consider because you currently have 2 seatings. You have a small population, and The MSBA's default goes to 3 seatings, which gives you a small cafeteria. But because you do 2 seatings now, and that's what you're going to continue in the future, you're technically asking for an increase in the cafeteria size. But they should be reasonable here and meet you and grant you that for additional reimbursement. I would hope so. Medical, that's the nurse's suite, no change. Administration and guidance, just a slight increase. A resource officer space, additional student support space, and additional guidance office. And there was some reduction to offset that. So that's 180 square feet being requested. And then custodial, no change. Okay, so that's all the base school stuff. And so that's a lot of requests, mainly in the ones that they'll consider is the core academic and the special education. I think this group just has to understand that they're probably not going to support the square footage, even for your auditorium that you currently have, that overage, or the 1,900 square feet of the gymnasium that's over. The other ones, align for student support, teacher support. Now we're going to just shift down to this other. Now that's a line on their template. So that's where the district office comes into play at 7250. And so obviously they're not going to, there's no sprinkler heads in there. So if we were doing an ad reno, we'd have to, remove the ceiling tiles and put some sprinkler heads in there. So there'll be some work. I wouldn't expect too much, but they'll deduct that. But because you have a new space, it would be unreasonable for them to charge you again. So that should be fine. Adult education is a program that's not on their template that would fit under other. So that's 815 square feet. Introduction of a pre-K program that's looking at 3 spaces and support at 4,600 square feet. So that would be a program that you actually had in the past, but this would kind of solidify it. And we're putting it under other. There still could be an opportunity that in a conversation with the MSBA that they might consider contributing to the pre-K program. But we're going to keep it under the other category right now. And then a community resource center that would be, obviously beneficial to the greater community at 500 square feet. So that's, 13,165 in that other category. So at the end of the day, square footage is money, and that's what this is all about. And so you need to be, reasonable in your request for it, which I think the group has been. But again, some of the other you already have, like I said earlier, baked in, such as district office. But there'll be some, conversations on what the school building committee, this is for your review, and we, kind of welcome your comments because there will be magnitude estimates created based on loose concepts, basically a block here and a block here, not too much detail, but they'll be based on, 158,000 square foot building. And we'll go into that. Let me just take, before I go any further, any questions on this? I know I know with the leadership team, we since mid-January, it was about 3 weeks before we got into the kind of smooth pattern of knowing, how this thing worked. I know you're seeing a lot of information right now, but I can take any information. I'll create that kind of overlay chart that was requested. I can also send you the detail template for your review for a backup. That might help. But any general questions, because this is important.
Ken, I did have a couple questions. So
Yes.
just to summarize, right now, based on your calculations, the net square footage is a little over 128,000 square feet. Based on the MSBA guidelines and our current enrollment, as it stands right now, and I know this is the negotiating part, they would authorize reimbursement of roughly 74,000 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yes, you could, yes, that's how it would work. And yes.
So far, based on all the hard work that the district leadership team and the admin of the high school and all the teachers the proposed that we think is a fair MSBA square footage reimbursement number is a little over 105,000.
Let me just go back to that, just so we're,
Okay.
well, right, but you got to remember in the other category,
So really what we're looking at is the 105 less the 13.
less the 1,900 for the gym, less the 2,500 for the auditorium.
So that proposed square footage of 105 is not actually what our wish list is right now. It's less than that.
So that's the general wish list. That's
Yeah,
the
the 105
that's
is the wish list.
the 105 is the wish list. That's the program.
So, okay, so right now, best case scenario, if the MSBA agrees with everything we say, which they always do, they would authorize 105, roughly 105,000 square feet of the existing 128,000, correct?
Yeah, sorry, just say that one more time.
So best case scenario, all the stars align. If the MSBA agrees with us, they would authorize reimbursement of 105,000 square feet of what we're proposing.
It would be unprecedented, but that would be if all the stars aligned. And
Okay,
yes,
so in that scenario, it's roughly 82% of what our existing square feet is.
yeah, rough.
So we're at roughly a 76% reimbursement rate. So for reimbursable expenses, we would be getting 82% of the cost covered at a 76% reimbursement rate. Is that correct?
Your effective reimbursement rate will be less than that. That's
Yeah,
the
so I
posted
just want to make sure. So
reimbursement
that's the concept we're talking about.
rate. That's supposing that you're going to look to renovate the entire 128,000 square feet. Of
But
net
wouldn't we
square
be
footage.
required, once you start working on a building, especially a commercial public building, don't you have to bring everything up to code?
We're yeah, and that on a future slide, I'll walk you through that. But yeah, there'll be space where we could go maybe light touch,
Right.
but we're gonna have to have big conversations about that.
But worst case scenario, right now, based on their guidelines at the 74,000 square feet, that's only 58% of our current net square footage.
That's correct.
So worst case scenario, we're going to be looking at only being able to reimburse 58% of the project at 76 cents on the dollar. Correct?
Yeah, it'll be less than that 76
It's
cents.
gonna be
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's, only,
because
it's going to be 58% of 76 cents.
But the 76% is your total reimbursement. Your effective reimbursement will likely be less than that, even regardless of the percentage of the
Of
building.
whatever qualifies as
Correct.
reimbursable.
Your eligible
expenses.
cost.
And thank you. That was the
Eligible,
term I was
eligible.
looking for. Okay.
Yeah, because they're gonna cap you at $333 a square foot, and most likely this will track higher. That they do that to everybody. They know buildings cost more money, even heavy renovations. So that's a factor. But
FF&E, soft costs,
I
will
wi-
all be capped.
I wish I could extract out what I think would happen, but I can't do that. I know the gym is not going to be considered, and I know the auditorium's not going to be considered. I know most of the other categories not going to be considered, but I can't go any further than that, just because historically every school is different. But those big items, the gym, the auditorium, that's like not going to happen. And then the other is just going to be the one benefit is the 72,000 or 7,200 of the district office, because that will be they'll take probably fire protection would be the only component there.
So as we move forward, obviously there's what we would all love to include in this renovation project, which is the ideal scenario for the kids of our town. But I think in the back of our minds, we also have to realize that most likely, and these are not going to be exact numbers, only about, best case scenario, only about 50 to 60% of the project is going to get reimbursed. Roughly.
Without mapping it all out, I
Just a
think
guess.
the way-
I
the
know
way-
architects don't like to guess.
The way you kind of just discounted it to that, I'm feeling is probably getting in the range, and it happens with all school projects.
Right.
It's not.
So again, we just have to remember that when we go to town meeting, obviously, one of the first questions that I would be asking as a taxpayer, and most likely everyone else, is what's going to be the total cost to the town, i.e., what's the debt going to be, and how that is going to impact everybody's tax
That's
rate.
my share. Yep.
Yep.
Um,
And that's why when we submit, so each, this final list, what they're going to reimburse for and what they're not going to,
yes.
they'll give it to you in small doses, but the big request, like the final response, is not going to happen until late in the game into schematic design. So we might submit on April 16th. They're going to hit the low hanging fruit just like I did. You're permitted to design the larger gymnasium, the larger auditorium, and all the others, but you're not going to be reimbursed. So right
Right.
there, we know probably by May, well, they'll look at it for a few weeks. In May, we'll know that, okay, they're not going to contribute to the gym, the auditorium, and the other category. So that at least starts to, fine, good, we know that. And then it's the SBC that needs to say, okay, everybody, is the 1,900 additional square feet something we really need? Or can we, load some other program in there to offset it and not request the 1,900, because now it's on the district.
But again, when you say that, I envision it as a new build where you could make that judgment call. Do we need to add 1,900 square feet to this new building? But when you're renovating an existing building, you have to renovate the entire building.
It's a good point, because what we were trying to do is say it's reasonable, because we've had other high schools that say 1,200 isn't enough. Really 1,400 is a good number. But you're absolutely right, and we could do a separate template for the new, and it could meet the default. Or even with the renovation, I could populate a fitness room of 1,900 square feet in that space in some way that would work. So that's even though it exists, it doesn't mean that we couldn't carve out that 1,900 square feet for other program.
You still have to renovate the 1,900 square feet.
Yes,
regardless.
yes, of course, but you just reduced the project by 1,900 square feet.
Reduce the project as far as what the MSBA is going to reimburse?
No, just like speaking, it's 158,000. So if this group decided we don't need the gymnasium at 1,400 square feet, just make it 12 and make it align with the MSBA, because they're not going to reimburse. Let's just do that now, and it'll change from 158,000 to 156. Or sorry,
Okay.
the net will change from 105 to 103.3.
But if you're going to renovate the gym, you have to renovate the entire gym. So it just means that additional square footage the town has to pay for 100%.
Yeah.
You're not eliminating that size of the gym because the gym's already there.
No, but that 1,900 square feet is somewhere else right now.
Where? What do you mean it's somewhere? I don't get that.
So the gym would be renovated to meet code and like new.
Right.
And it's within the box of the gym. It's 14,000 square feet. If you were comfortable with a gym that was 12,000 square feet, even though I know the physical box is there,
Yep.
we could design and study providing a gym within that existing that's 2,000 square feet less. And most likely what that means is I need to take programs such as a fitness room or the trainer's room or the PE office or the AD office, and I would have to build that into the big box of the gym. But therefore, you're not asking for the additional 2,000 square feet anymore, because I've taken other program and I've populated it into that volume. And so your net square footage would drop by the 2,000 square feet.
But it wouldn't change the fact that the town would have to pay to renovate that 2,000 square feet regardless of how you use it.
No, you're going to pay for it regardless, even if
Okay,
it,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Every space in there you're paying for. And even in a gym with all the ventilation requirements, that's a, we'll look at the gym floor, we'll look on all that, but that's a full system upgrade, 100%.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
Mr. Hurton, I have a question. Going back when we were looking, I don't remember which slide it was on. But I'm curious, what does a gender neutral locker room look like? What does that mean when kids have physical education and they need to change? Are we talking about all the genders being together in a room to change together? Like, what does that really mean?
No, that's what would be there right now. You'd have based on the template, you'd have a traditional boys and girls locker room, and this would provide options, if you will, for others who are identifying themselves with a particular sex. It's just an option that we're seeing in some school projects. Just like we have to have some general toilets around the plan that are open and not necessarily designated, male, female.
Okay, so it would be, so you're saying that the proposal is that there is still the separate space for people who want to change and then the option for the gender neutral? Or is it the whole thing gender neutral? That's the part I'm not following.
No, there would be a boys and a girls separate,
Okay,
and this is to provide that option.
so it's in addition to the
It's
boys
in-
and girls separate.
it's in
Okay, that's
addition.
what I didn't understand when I saw that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And if I may,
ahead.
Lisa, I don't think we were talking, when we were talking about a gender neutral space, about a full locker room. It was
No,
maybe
it
a
was-
bathroom and with a shower, having a small space just available should we ever run into that situation. It was not a full locker room for gender neutral.
It was not, and then it would just be in the same proximity as the other locker rooms, so there's kind of quality
Okay,
there.
yeah, I couldn't tell when we read that if that was, we were converting the entire locker room to be gender neutral. So that's what I wanted
Nope.
clarification on. And then going back to these questions, I guess part of what I'm trying to understand, looking at the MSBA template with what we're proposing for both programming as well as space. What I'm concerned about is when we go in front of the town on this, if they were to ask, okay, this sounds great, but we think it's too expensive. We don't want to invest in that. If we were looking at just costs to do all of the basic maintenance updates, what would that look like? I mean, will we be able to offer that up as a comparison, or is that not an
Yes.
option under the programming?
Base repairs will be an option.
Yeah,
that we're gonna cost out.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
go out. Yeah, and the base repair still does have a lot of upgrades. We still replace some major finishes and items like that, but it's not knocking walls down. It's not reprogramming. So there will be a base repair. The MSBA requires it, so they have kind of a jumping off point.
Okay, thanks.
There's, if I may, there's three options, Lisa: a base repair, a new build, and a renovation. So they're exploring all options.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Kent, did you have anything else, or does that complete your presentation?
No, I want to go into the option scenarios again as kind of a overall concept. So as part of this, we have to submit, just as Monique just said, we have to, at a bare minimum, a baseline code upgrade. So that's taking 100% of the existing building, fire protection. We need to get proper ventilation, and you actually have to base it as a real option. So if this is a building that's going to be used for the next 40 years, how do we bring it up to code? It would even have some of that thermal envelope, updates, and probably the roof would probably be replaced as part of that. So you're talking about thermal conditions, you're talking about health and safety with fire protection. Your generator would probably just be baseline, but it would all be related to state code baselines, nothing over the top. So we're not going to put air conditioning in your every classroom. That's not what this is about. So that'll map out major categories. And at the same time, we do, so you're putting in fire protection, mechanical, so the ceilings will be replaced. We will price out painting the walls because that's just what you're going to want to do. And typically we would price out replacing the floors, door hardware to make it ADA compliant. You have some ramps that don't quite meet ADA compliance, so we'd have to, the internal ramps, we'd have to replace those. So we look at everything. So if you were asked by the community, well, I think your option, your preferred option is very expensive. What if you just upgraded the entire facility to meet code? You'll have that number. So that's option one. Okay, so option two is where we start getting into taking that proposed program and making it real. Like, how can we put this proposed program in here, try to meet those adjacencies and ideal situations, but we know we're not going to take anything away. So there'll be essentially 31,000 square feet of unassigned space. And kind of to the point before, we can't just mothball 31,000 square feet. We could try to do a light touch, but we still need to bring that additional unassigned space. It's called unassigned because it's not within the proposed program. So most likely you're going to see the existing building with gray blocks that say unassigned. We could call it all storage. It doesn't really matter, but it's not on the template. But it is an option that's going to, if I was a community member, okay, I want to see what your proposed program is in my building. And then you'd say, obviously, this is a school that was designed for a larger population. We are in excess of 31,000 square feet, but we're not going to remove anything. And what does that mean? We would try to look at where those areas are and try to light touch. So the renovation number could be, kind of lower. And then we'd have to have a conversation with the MSBA to see if they would consider that rationale. Here's 31,000. We're going to do a light touch to bring it up to code with ventilation and heat. So we definitely want to look at that option. And then you start moving into the options that you're going to start seeing the kind of the cost reduction. So there would be, I call it in the option threes. It would be 100, it would meet the program at 158,000, and we would remove 31,000 square feet of existing. We would deduct the building by 31,000 square feet. And we would have some methods to do so. Without removing wings, we would have strategies to try to look at removing 31,000 square feet. So you have a true existing building at 158,000 square feet that will probably come in less expensive than, option two. I actually probably would guarantee it would come in because it's 31,000 square feet less. So if I was in the community, that option is probably looking pretty good because it's less and you could kind of keep the integrity of the building and have some kind of architectural interface that would start, removing some areas. So I think everyone's probably pretty excited about those option threes. Now, option fours just goes a step further, and this is going into kind of due diligence. So we want to look at a variety of options that would take some of the existing, even more of the existing away and add some new. So those would be new additions, but again, capping at 158,000 square feet. And again, we need to look at as many options as possible because when you go to the MSBA and even to the community, they're going to say, have you looked at everything? And so we have to do that. So there will be some options and maybe it has no traction and it has a conversation here for a day or two, but at least we talked about it. So we need to look at some of those that track removing more square footage, replacing with new, maybe there's some unique advantage to it. And so I would say those options four are, there could be something there. And then new construction, obviously we understand that you have a good building here with plenty of space and we are required to look at new construction. So most likely that would be in the area of your current baseball fields. So we would look at a building in the fields and then we'd have a number to demolish the existing school and fully abate it as part of that with the hazardous materials. And then you would have to probably replace the fields that you took away. And so you could imagine this number getting pretty up there because you're replacing a whole series of athletic fields and full demolition and full hazardous abatement of a new building. And the only nuance to that is sometimes new construction could be a faster construction duration phase. 158,000 is going to be the least disruptive to parents and students, and it's going to be 24 months all day long to build, where the other ones are going to have some phasing sequences. So they would be slightly longer for the construction duration. I feel like with the excess square footage, we look at this, but I feel fairly confident, but I haven't gone in any detail that, portable classrooms, you may not even require portable classrooms. I don't want to say that 100%, it still needs to be vetted. There might need to be some for some surplus, but because of your space, we may be able to really phase this efficiently, A building, then B building, and then C building. So there's a lot of information here. And again, this is just, it's big picture looking at this, and what the MSBA and this group, I hope I'm expressing, the heavy lift is the educational plan and that proposed space template. Those are the two biggest parts of this submission. All the design options and just magnitude cost assigned to that, I mean, is pretty much everyday stuff. It gets really exciting in the next phase, but right now we have to get the educational plan and that square foot template, with a general understanding by everybody in this group that being submitted is the best model being submitted. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot of information. And I think that's one of the reasons we were trying to perhaps get another SBC follow-up perhaps on April 1st.
Is that it for your presentation, Ken?
That's it.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's a lot of information. I remember Mr. Avlis and Mr. Perangeli will remember sitting in those sometimes cold, long nights at Filmer, listening to these presentations about Park Avenue. I'm thinking, how do you even spell architect? But fortunately, that's why we hire professionals. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the warrant. The proposed warrant totals $5,527.50, and it is for services done by Colliers. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the warrant as presented.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Blythe, seconded by Mr. Young. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Nieves,
Yes.
Mr. Avlis,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Blythe,
Yes.
Mrs. Contos,
Yes.
and I vote yes, the motion passes unanimously. Based on
Thank you.
previous comments, it appears that the admin team and the professionals we work with are looking for us to meet on April 1st. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Voting members, would we have a quorum? Who's available and who isn't? Lisa's good.
I
I
should
am.
be, yep.
Everybody looks good. All right. So as of right now, our next meeting will be on April 1st. I assume this time works well again for everybody at 6 o'clock. If for some strange reason, and it's not necessary, you wouldn't hurt our feelings if you canceled that and then had us meet on the 15th, but obviously we will plan to potentially meet on the 1st with another meeting date, which is our normally scheduled building committee meeting on the 15th.
Great.
Any other comments or questions from anybody? Again, I want to thank everybody. I know there's been a lot of work going on at a very busy time in the school district. So again, please extend our thanks and appreciation to your colleagues and the teachers and everybody and everyone who's been working hard trying to put this plan together. So thank you. With that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Nieves,
yes.
Mr. Alex,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mrs. Blythe,
Yes.
Mrs. Contos, and I vote
Yes.
yes. Sorry, I jumped up too quickly. I vote yes, the motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you. Nice job, Kent and Ken.
Thank you, Kat. Nice job. Thank you.
Have a good night,
Thank you all.
everyone.
Thanks, you
Thank
too.
you.